Are you looking to fine-tune? Whether for your business, your job, your team, or yourself. In each episode, we will be discussing different ideas and opinions using real-world examples to help you see opportunities, innovate, and succeed. Hi, it's Corby Fine, and welcome to Fine Tune. So every once in a while, I come across an organization that I have no idea exists. You know, we've all had that experience where we're looking up a stocks symbol, we're watching a financial news show, we find out one of our friends or colleagues or neighbors works somewhere, we ask them what they do, and it's like, what the heck is that? I didn't even really know that existed. Well, last year I was in Vancouver and I was speaking at a session for one of my favorite technology companies, Adobe. And I had an opportunity to meet an individual, Manoj, who was exactly in one of those situations, working for an organization in this really cool role that I seriously had no idea existed. But what I did know were all of the brands and companies and assets that they rolled up into. So it was just this, weird, interesting conversation. And so for today, I've actually asked Manoj to join me on the podcast to talk a little bit about himself, a little bit about his really interesting role, and a little bit about his really interesting company, Northland Properties. So Manoj, welcome to the show. And as an introduction, Manoj is the CDO and CMO, so the Chief Digital Officer and the Chief Marketing Officer for Northland Properties. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Corby. It looks like it'd be a great conversation. And yeah, we did meet a few times over the past couple of years, and the last one being Vancouver, when we were all able to kind of be together last summer or so.
Yes, well, I'm now back on the center East Coast, and you are still sitting in, the beautiful West Coast. So I would normally say jealous, but the weather finally got good here. So anyway, fair game.
You deserve it. You had some crappy winters this past year.
Yeah. We did. Yeah. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about the company first? Again, one of those organizations with a lot of different brands, and I think people will be surprised when you describe it.
Yeah, totally. And it was surprising as I was interviewing for the role last year. And I'm like, who's Northland? And then until the executive recruiter told me, and you peel back all the layers and you're like, okay, this is a big deal. So it's a amazing family-owned Canadian business, started in the late 60s, 1967, by Bob Glardy. So it's the Glardys are the family who own the company. And it's a kind of a parent company to a variety of different brands. So it's got the hotel group, which is Sandman Sutton, and there's almost 60 of those, mostly in Canada, but also in the US. There's also in the UK and Ireland as well. We've got the master rights to Denny's in Canada. So we own Denny's Canada. So it's mostly corporate owned along with the franchisees as well. And then we got a couple other cool brands that you've heard about as well. So we got Moxie's restaurants. We got Chop Steakhouse, Shark Club. Recently, last year, we purchased Grouse Mountain Resort, which is like a major resort in Vancouver here. I think it's one of the most heavily visited resorts there is in Vancouver. We also own Revelstoke Mountain Resort, which is like a Whistler-style resort in Revelstoke, British Columbia, small town, but the best skiing there is. And then the family owns some sports teams. Like they've got the Kamloops Blazers and the WHL. And then they own the NHL's Dallas Stars as well. In addition to that, they've got construction and real estate. So we build our own hotels and renovate our own hotels to keep things interesting. And that's why we're, I think, so successful, is because the ecosystem is kind of managed end to end by the entire company. So my role spans marketing and digital. So on the marketing side, I've got internal, external comms. I've got day-to-day marketing ops, including brand strategy, all the campaigns that run. And on the digital side, we've got basically looking at the customer-facing experience, e-commerce, digital media and analytics, as well as some transformation work that we're looking at with a variety of different brands as well. So my vision is to just operate like an internal agency and try to build as much scale and efficiency as I can across the brands. So that's me in a nutshell.
So I can go skiing, I can spend the weekend, watch a hockey game, and have a $2.99 special for breakfast of bacon and eggs the next morning.
That's right.
All within one organization.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's an amazing, mashup of brands and assets that all have their own sort of rapport with different audience segments. Talk a little bit about when you say build an internal agency and structuring how you operate in that organization. There's a lot of strong brand presence from each of those different groups. And I can imagine that someone running an NHL hockey team from a marketing and audience development perspective is going to have a lot of desire for autonomy, especially when compared to someone running, a QSR like a Denny's or a hotel chain from a branding perspective. So, how do you think about each of those different brands and their own marketing leaders, and yourself being sort of this central cog and building a team to support them all? How do you structure that, and how do you get buy-in from each of those brand leaders to truly partner with you and not feel like they're losing some control and autonomy?
Yeah, and I don't think we're perfect by any means. And if I push the sports teams to the side for a second, because they've got their own kind of management with the NHL and WHL and the systems that exist there. But with the rest of the folks, so the idea is that we've got two people, the CEO and the president, who are basically the leads of all of the divisions. And and then we have divisional presidents. So we got one for resorts, one for restaurants, and for hotels, and then each brand has its own brand president. And then from a centralization perspective, we've centralized my group, IT, and then finance and accounting, just as a starting point from a heads of department perspective. And then what I've done is it's definitely not easy, right? So each brand president definitely has their own vision and wants to go one way or the other. So what we've done is under my group, I've tried to have a brand marketing leader attached to each brand president. So that all they do is they like kind of live, breathe, and eat that specific brand, because I think it's important to have that consistent focus, and that's what you wake up for to drive success with all day long. We have some kind of key resources that are attached to that brand leader, and then what I've done is I've tried to centralize certain aspects of my department. So I've recently, in the last, I've only been there for about 8 months or so, but I've centralized digital already. So digital marketing, digital media. It made sense to do that because there's a huge opportunity from a buying perspective on the media side, as well as the analytics and then the execution of it, to make sure that we do that centrally. Otherwise, I think we're just losing out on the scale and probably spending more money than we should on a cost perspective. So we did that. And then my next kind of focus is how do we do that for other parts of my business, which will be, I think, creative and social media. That's what I'm thinking about next. I think there's a huge opportunity to centralize that content development, that managing of creative resources and team members there, so we can become this engine of execution across all the brands as well. And then we'll just continually progress. So as I see opportunities, perhaps we do that for social media, perhaps we do that for things such as loyalty. I think that's going to be a huge play for us. You kind of mentioned that you can kind of play within all of our brands, and I think loyalty will be a big part of that going down the road as well. So that's how I've set up my team as well. Like I kind of mentioned, I like to use an agency model. Each brand has its own budget, and we have to be able to intelligently use all those budgets. So we're applying value there, and then giving the brands as much support as we can with cost and value in mind.
So I've worked in a few organizations that have followed somewhat similar models with, I would say, less complexity in terms of the distribution and variety of brands under the umbrella. Some have had three, some have had two. None have had as many as you're currently responsible for. But maybe talk a little bit about, irrespective of 10 brands, 5 brands, 2 brands, or even one brand, where do you see the future of this concept you mentioned of bringing it in house versus the pure outsource model? And maybe I'll give you the real tough question early on in this conversation. In that sense of doing this, as you think about moving more in-house and centralizing core capabilities, what do you see as the future of the agency as a support mechanism to organizations going with the more in-house route?
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussions with our existing agency partners. So in addition to my group, there are agencies involved, and unfortunately, I think we have probably too many kind of agencies involved. Like every single brand has an agency attached to them, and that's just not good from a scale perspective. So we're looking to find great partnerships, and that's what we've been working on for the last 3 or 4 months. And I think we've identified who those folks are. But obviously, in our past roles and your roles that you've been at and I've been at, we've had big agencies attached to us. And I think the model is starting to change, where rather than a complete outsource model, I think it's turning into more of a hybrid approach, where you're using agencies as needed in specific end-to-end capabilities. And I think agencies realize this, and they're starting to also pivot their capabilities, not to be as much execution, but also to be as much educators as possible, so that people can bring value in house. And they're having to change their cost model, so to be more outcome driven versus the typical, here's my standard hourly rate or my standard kind of media rate. I think they're having to flex, because I see a lot of groups trying to bring talent in house as well. But I see this as a hybrid model, at least for the next couple of years, as we transition.
So let's explore that a little bit with regards to digital specifically. I would say the most interesting and innovative things I've seen lately from the agency world are things like agencies creating new business units under the umbrella of the parent company that are very, very specialized. So things like Amazon focused agencies, right? So helping different companies market merchandise, create better funnels of acquisition in other people's platforms in the Amazon ecosystem, irrespective of whether they have direct e-commerce or not. And agencies who can amalgamate skill sets from creative to copywriting to search optimization to merchandising to all of the elements that maybe a traditional organization who hasn't gone into, let's say, an Amazon ecosystem, get them started. To your point, educate, but also execute to some point.
Right, right.
That's something I've seen interesting, and it is very digital focused. So when you think about your world and where you've started to centralize very, very digital oriented things, right? Analytics, content, which is often derived against, the search benefit and things like that. Where do you see digital in your organization 12 months from now, 24 months from now? You've talked a little bit about some of the synergies. Where does it stop? Like, how far do you go on truly centralizing digital capabilities in a multi-brand organization?
Hmm. And there's so many aspects to digital. Obviously, from like you can make it like the actual experiences, and you can make it the media side, you can make it the content side. But I think with us, I think it's an untapped opportunity. So we're a very kind of traditional business, which hasn't put a lot of emphasis into the digital world. And just for some context, I believe we touch around 10 million Canadians in terms of an interaction perspective in a given year. So at that point, collectively, we become a fairly big deal. Independently, I think if you looked at just the Moxies or just the hotels group, I think it's a medium-sized, small to medium-sized business. But when together, I think we become very powerful. So I think, to your earlier point, I think there's a huge opportunity in our digital space for that. People can stay, they can eat, and they can play with our brands, and you can stay within that ecosystem altogether. And we'd love it if you, once you enter our world, you never leave the world as well. So I think along with my partner in crime, the CIO, I think our vision is to really bring ecosystems together. So I think we're going to be heavily investing into things such as a CRM or a customer data platform. There's a huge opportunity to collect different data sets, understand that Corby is the same guy who ate at Denny's, who also stayed at the hotel, but went to the resort as well at the same time. So we don't know that today. And that's a big problem. And unfortunately, we don't know today because of our legacy experience that you stayed at a hotel in Vancouver and you also stayed at the same hotel in Toronto. So huge opportunity just to get modern. So part of the reason I took the role, I think we can go from 0 to 100 fairly fast in the next 12 to 24 months. And we have to because of the pace at which digital is changing. So I think that's an investment we're going to be making big time. And that takes a lot of logic and science in regards to how you stitch together that customer. So it's simple from a customer experience perspective, but we handle the complexity based on the ecosystem we're creating in the background. And the other big one for me would be the content engine. I think, as you know, I think someone said, like, we scroll meters and meters of content with our thumbs each day. Might be like hundreds and hundreds of feet, whatever it is. But if we can't become relevant and understand the various micro moments that are happening, if I just attach that each of my brands, I think we just become too slow. So I want focus there in regards to an end-to-end experience where you can copyright, you can create video, you can create whether it's content for social, YouTube, whatever you want to, and then amplify it with the right media. If I can do that end to end, I think, and do it across the brand, I think we can get some scale and we become relevant in a space that's highly crowded, but obviously has all the eyeballs on it too at the same time. So those are the two areas I hope to put a lot of focus on cross brand.
It's difficult enough for most organizations to do what you just described within a single brand or a single organization, and you're talking about doing it across multiple. That journey of micro moments, being able to identify and then trigger certain content types irrespective of format in different platforms through different channels with different media weights based on the outcomes that you expect to get. So that sounds like a really daunting feat. Maybe break it down and say there's people listening here in much less complicated scenarios in their jobs. They're digital, they're marketers. It's the people that listen to my podcast. Maybe give one or two things that you would advise people in the same situation as yourself, but maybe a little less complicated with maybe a single brand focus. Where do you start? Like, what are the first two or three things you need to do to really break down how to even begin to think about identifying those micro moments, tracking them, and putting a bit of a strategy behind it? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, and I think we can relate to that because we've got these essentially these are independent hotels as well as they manage within each region, and there's restaurants within that as well. I think people should probably forget that you need massive enterprise licenses to do this effectively. And I'll give a small example in a restaurants business, right? So there's the world of takeout and delivery has become massive for us. That's basically all the business that we're doing right now. So if I was a restaurateur, it's very simple to jump onto things such as Skip and DoorDash. So I think those are platforms. So you have to. I think the bigger picture is looking at where demand exists, right? So demand exists on those channels, but I think there's a huge opportunity to create partnerships. And there are amazing companies out there that can do commerce for you at the scale of a single restaurant or a single entity versus at a massive kind of a company like ours. So if you want to do commerce, there are companies out there that can build you a very quick kind of menu and operating system that connect with these platforms. So you can do take on delivery on your own website very, very easily. And you pay per performance, you pay per transaction. There's a less license fee, so you're not tying into your capital each time. You can get a lot of value, and fortunately, it's actually it's way more affordable than the demand platforms such as Skip and DoorDash, which is nice to understand as well. And then I think the key one is once you've got customers into your ecosystem, and that's just like who they are, like it's Corby, his email address, what he ordered, which are come standard with some of these platforms. And I'll say a couple of them on the restaurant side. There's Smooth Commerce does it. There's Ready Pay does it. There's a company called Xdine by Igon. They do it. So these are all platforms that you can implement immediately. And then as simple as like creating an email system that's automated. So whether it's MailChimp or Campaign Monitor, being able to reach out to your customers. So every other day you are top of mind versus you're getting peppered with Domino's or McDonald's or wherever it is. I think those are easy wins for restaurateurs as well. And I would just say make sure your processes are very airtight. Like people want to be able to pick up and doing in a meaningful way, so it's contactless. And these ecosystems provide that. And then the rest of it is just your processes, right? The fact that your health and cleanliness focused with gloves and masks, things like that. And I think once you get these kind of core pieces of implementations in, it's not like you have to be a massive business spending millions of dollars to do it. So that's a restaurant focused example, but I do believe anyone can do that.
I think sometimes we do think about, this massive end solution to a problem that's really not that complicated and can be solved with sort of simpler tactics. So on that, you've got two hats. You've got a digital and a marketing hat. How do you focus your time?
Yeah, totally. And I think you've nailed it. If I don't prioritize, I could be spending my time in all the wrong places very easily because it's all interesting, right? So I know that, for example, our hotels business is the revenue engine of the company. So I have to spend more time there. And a lot of my time also has to be spending and helping team members get unblocked in regards to their day-to-day tasks as well. But in terms of KPIs, I like to look at momentum rather than a moment in time. I think that's highly important. If you look at a moment in time, it's like you look at seasonality, and it's hard to get a read based on all the micro events that are happening. In a moment of time, how are you performing? But if you look at it in regards to like the last 3 months or year over year over the last 3 months, that momentum is highly important. And I think the 2 or 3 KPIs I look at from a CDO perspective, I think it's self-serve transactions. It's the ability to drive revenue, self-serve in terms of self-management, in our case, online ordering and e-commerce of hotels, of self-booking, and the impact that has to cost. So I think self-serve transactions is important to me. From my marketing hat slash digital hat, I think it's growth and acquisition. I think if we aren't driving incremental business, then I don't know why our team exists. And from a customer experience perspective, I think it's effort. And the effort is difficult to manage. So I'm going to try to break it down in regards to how you can start to do that. Really, there are moments in each journey. Each one requires time, effort in order to accomplish it. And I think the friction is high in certain areas of your journey. So the least friction you can have is each part of the journey. I think it's good for us as the owner of the companies and things like that. But it's good for the end guests and consumers because that's how they deal with the world today. They want effortless experience so that they can just accomplish their task. And it requires us to look at data in regards to transactional. It requires customer feedback quantitatively. And also sometimes it requires us to just do a time series understanding of what's happening from moment in the journey to moment. So if you can really understand customer effort and make that easy, I think there's so many wins that it unlocks as well.
Those are really good, and I think they apply, universally to pretty much anybody's business. So as we get to the end, I'd say, given your role, given the company, the one thing I really want to understand, because your organization touches so many different points in the life of an individual consumer: entertainment, food, dining, travel, vacation, business. You're across the gamut. In your 8 months there, what are a couple of the things that you've learned by looking at the analytics and looking at customer behavior that have maybe surprised you a little bit about the way in which Canadian in particular, but Americans are actually interacting with your brands?
Yeah, with us, I was actually on the hotel side. I was surprised, and you can easily see if what happens if you don't have an amazing frictionless digital experience, how much you can actually spend on demand channels that are really expensive, right? And it's interesting. The hotels and restaurant space very different, but they have like the same situation going on the hotel side. And this is similar to my airline back on the WestJet. You have these entities like Expedia, Booking.com, who would love to take your content, and we have to use it for distribution and in order to sell our inventory, but it comes at a big price tag. And if you don't invest into that and you don't have this ecosystem of acquiring your own set of customers, I think it becomes a losing game on the cost side. And you basically don't even have the ability to communicate, because that ownership, it actually belongs to Expedia more than it belongs to the hotel side. And I feel that the same situation is happening to restaurants today. So this happens to be Uber Eats and Skip and DoorDash and Fedora and all those types of situations. They're doing an amazing job for demand. You need it, but it comes at a massive price tag. And restaurants, on a margin perspective, don't make a lot of margin versus like the hotel side. So it's hard for us to afford that unless we can do a cross-sell upsell opportunity. So I think that is the biggest lesson I've learned, in that if you don't slow down that growth from those kind of indirect channels, it'll become a very almost uphill climb in regards to getting that back. So we are putting some systems in place now. Some of these may have went in for other businesses that are our competitors years and years ago, but I feel that during this pandemic, we've been forced to accelerate that big time. And if we don't do that, we will be a laggard in regards versus a company that's resilient coming out of this as well. So I think that's the biggest thing I learned.
Interesting. So, on one hand, your core business is being sort of disintermediated by all kinds of different platforms and enablers that can get in the middle between yourself and your customer, whether it's restaurants and ordering and delivery, whether it's hotels and sort of room, aggregation buyers and so on. And at the same time, internally, you're trying to figure out how to create a centralized service as well to almost disintermediate some of the legacy services from agencies and maybe partners that aren't adding as much value. But I think it sounds like you've got at least a direction, a strategy. You understand what you're trying to achieve. You've got key KPIs focused on growth and acquisition. Last question: in all of the things we've talked about, you've talked about metrics, you've talked about strategy, you've talked about efficiency and operating models. Where does customer satisfaction sit? Like at the end of this, to your point, and you've talked about the customer and the journey, but at what point do you measure and say, is this working for you, customer? And how quickly do you adapt and change based on the results of that?
Yeah, I would say that we are very immature in that regard right now. But my goal and vision, I think that needs to be front and center. I think in addition to customer satisfaction, I think the right way to do that would be is you have to somehow do it at the various moments in the journey as well. If you don't understand that and you collect whether it's NPS at the very end, what you get is a score that might not understand what's happening across each touch point. And I think if you optimize each touch point based on that customer satisfaction or NPS, I think you're way more effective versus just looking at end to end. Because if I don't know, you've booked hotels and flights and restaurants, things like that. If you were to, I don't know, 30 days later, try to give us a customer satisfaction score, it's not really a true representation of how you felt in the moment. And if you can't capture the moment, then it's hard to optimize that specific area. And that's how I do want to get there. And that's how I look to get there with technology that we're looking at. But I think traditionally, if you're just doing a guest feedback survey 1 or 2 weeks later, you might as well not do that, because you're getting a fake version of what the actual satisfaction and the qualitative results are.
So I expect that the customer effort in my ability to go to a local Denny's, which there is one in downtown Toronto, there is always someone standing outside in a, oddly enough, bacon outfit trying to give away coupons, and it makes me smile and makes me think about the restaurant every day. That the next time I go in for my breakfast special, I expect some sort of a customer satisfaction survey, because I actually want to tell you how to make it better next time.
Yeah,
And I'm waiting for that. So
soon enough. Soon enough.
there's a task. Listen, Manoj Jasra, the Chief Digital Officer and Chief Marketing Officer for Northland Properties, living the dream in Vancouver, looking at the mountains probably right now from your window. Very, very jealous, but I really appreciate you spending the time with me today, giving some of your insights and helping others really understand some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of the intersection of digital and marketing and how it's affecting really every business. So really appreciate your insights and time today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Corby. Really enjoyed it. Good luck to you with the podcast and good luck to you here on in as well. Thank you very much.
All right, look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, cool.
You've been listening to Fine Tune. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can connect with me on Twitter at CFine, through LinkedIn at CorbyFine, or visit my website, corbyfine.com. Fine Tune is produced by me, Corby Fine. Thanks for listening.